All right, the first scrimmage of the fall camp is over and done with, and we have some intel, some news and notes, and a recap. And the news that we have mostly, they seem to be far ahead of where they were a season ago. We talk about what's in store for the rest of fall camp and who showed out on Saturday. Some freshmen making plays. You're not going to be surprised at who it is. Locked on Gamecocks starts right now.
You are Locked On Gamecocks, your daily podcast on the South Carolina Gamecocks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, guys? Welcome into Locked On Gamecocks. I'm your host, Chris Marler. Hope everyone's having a fantastic weekend as it comes to an end, and we go into Monday. But got a good show for you today. We're recording this Sunday night. Before we get into it, I want to say thank you to everyone making Locked On Gamecocks your first listen each and every day. Shout out to our everydayers. Remember, we're a free and available podcast wherever you get your podcasts, as well as on YouTube, part of the Locked On Gamecock or part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode brought to you by our friends at Game Time. Listen, download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Can't recommend it enough. Get with the folks at Game Time as quickly as you can. All right, so let's get into the show. Here's what we're going to talk about today. Fall camp had their first scrimmage on Saturday. We're going to talk about what we heard. This is one of the most closed access fall camps that I've seen around the SEC. Not a ton of availability to the media, right? We'll get into that, but what we still heard and what was told to us from around camp and people that were actually available around the actual scrimmage itself. First scrimmage is a big deal. We compare it to what happened last year. Talk about where Sellers is, some of the people he was throwing to, and some surprises maybe about some people you're hearing about. Now, the other part is this. We're going to talk about some news that came out last week. We're going to talk about this later in the week as well. But LaNorris Sellers is now the odds-on favorite to be picked number one overall in next year's NFL draft because of the – I don't want to say it's a rumor because it's his grandpa that said it, but Arch Manning's grandpa, Archie Manning, for those of you old heads like me, who said he's going to be back at Texas for another year next year. We'll see if that happens or not. Either way, you have a quarterback that is now projected to be number one overall. And then in the final segment, we'll talk about Spencer Rattler. His debut didn't go super great, but another former Gamecock on the same team got himself a really, really good opportunity and took advantage of it as best he could. So let's get into the show. Here's what I was looking for with the scrimmage, right? I want to see where Sellers is. I want to see where the receivers are. Obviously, it's hard to sit here and look at you know the sayings that the immovable object meets the what's it? I don't know. Should have used the sayings. Now I'm forgetting what it is. The unstoppable force, or whatever, meets the immovable object. The opposite of that kind of seems maybe true about the interior of this offensive line versus the interior of the defensive line. That's one of the most intriguing parts of this team going into the season. Now, I will say this too. That's not a knock on them. It's more so just like in any times, and you guys know this, you guys are a really smart audience. But like anytime you see like a spring game or you see a fall camp or a scrimmage or anything like that, if somebody runs the ball well, that inherently kind of leads you to believe, well, like the offense looked great. Well, that means the defense must be bad. Or like that's how these things kind of go. And there's no place on the team that has more change happening like in two position groups that couldn't be closer together than the interior of this offensive line and the interior of this defensive line. I say this stat over and over again. You guys probably know it by heart now. 93.5% of your overall snaps on the interior offensive line are gone, right? So you got to replace 3 starters. The defensive line, so like the interior part of that defensive line, you lost not just starters, but you lost people that were in the rotation and people that were really, really significant from a production standpoint, especially in those positions, not just stopping the run, but also getting like, almost like an anomaly amount of sacks, just an uncommon amount of sacks from that position last year for South Carolina. So you got to replace all that. How do you replace all of it? Now, I think that's one of the things I'm interested in. The other part is this. I want to see what Sellers has in spring, right? Around him for one, at different positions. But the big thing you want to see from Sellers is, one, you don't want any injuries, and two, you want to sit here and go into a situation where it's like, all right, if Sellers is going to be starting, What are the few things we want him to work on and be better at this season? And one of those things, because listen, he's already elite. He's already an elite quarterback. There are some things to work on. He's still a baby, man. Like, he's a true junior. He's going into, I think he's 20, maybe he's 21 now, but like, he's not like, it's not like he's been in college forever. You saw this recent trend in the past couple of years where you've had these like quarterbacks that were, in school for 5, 6, sometimes 7 years. Stetson Bennett, his case, he was there for like 18 years in Athens. But when you have Sellers, he's going into year 2 as a starter. What's the next step for him, right? And you want to get nitpicky with this kind of stuff because it's like, we already know so many things he does well. I don't need to see him scramble, right? I don't need to see that. What I need to see is how he is in his pocket presence, and what that looks like from year 1 to year 2, and what he's looking like in terms of like developed as a passer. Is he able to layer certain throws? Is he able to sit here and hit accurate? Like what is he hitting most consistently? Where's his accuracy best at? Because this is not an offense that's going to be throwing behind the scrimmage a lot. There's not a screen merchant type deal like you saw at Oregon with Bo Nix and that kind of situation. So what does he need to do to get better? And I think part of that, the first thing I look at is, what's his pocket presence like? Because there were times, especially early last year, where it's like, man, he had a couple of moments where it's like, you just got to be better than that. You get the timing, the internal clock that you have as a quarterback had to be a little bit better than it was at times last year. It just wasn't. It wasn't there a lot. I brought up this stat. We had Clark Brooks, SEC stat cat, the guy who works for On3, who's very, very excited about LaNorris Sellers. We love LaNorris Sellers, right? One of the things that was one of those like most surprising stats was you saw how many times he was running for his life last year, right? Like 41 sacks, all the TFLs, all the pressure. The pressure rate was 43.5%. Almost half of his dropbacks, he was being pressured, right? So one of the numbers that came out though was like who had the most time between their snap and their throw, right? And you usually look at that like time to throw the football. Usually you would think like the longer you have, the better your offensive line is being. But we know what this offensive line has been over the last 2 years, and especially last year, and it's not that. So LaNorris having not only just the highest in the SEC at like 3.28 seconds, he had one of the highest in the entire country in all Power 4 programs. So has his pocket presence gotten better? Yes. By all means, one of the things that he and Mike Shula worked on most in the offseason was figuring out ways to get him into situations where he feels more comfortable. He's able to sit there and not be you don't want to take away the opportunity for him to run, but you want him to develop and learn how to get more comfortable in uncomfortable situations. And that's what he's done. That's what he's done a tremendous job of being able to do going into year 2. Anyone that was at the scrimmage, he's clearly the starter. There's a fight for the backup, obviously. Aaron Nolan doesn't seem to be a part of it, which is kind of surprising. At least the names that were dropped. Luke Doty is still the guy that's going to be running with QB2. But the names that kind of came off the page and were on the short list of things you're allowed to hear, it felt like kind of a who's who of players that you would expect to make an impact. Maybe they're young or transfer guys, but players you expect to make an impact going into this season. LaNorris looks good, and he is well ahead of schedule from last year. I think that's something that is a big deal because there's a part of this that feels like it's like, man, you got to start over this team, and there's so much of the national media that looks at this team and it's like, oh man, they got to start from scratch, and they lost all these players in the NFL and blah blah blah. Like, what are they going to do? And then you sit there and look at it, and it's like, I maintain the time off. I wish we could have just kept playing. Like LaNorris in those final 6 games, I wish we could have just kept playing and got into this season because you never want to slow down. It's like stopping somebody. It's like stopping somebody in the middle of a roll on a craps table. Like you just don't want to do that. Like let him work, let him eat, let him make us some money, right? And with LaNorris, it kind of feels like going into the season, it's like you have these high expectations, but you really want to hit the ground running. And by all means, it seems like he's going into the season with that, not just as the mentality and expectation, but he's going into the season with that kind of momentum as well, which is a big deal, I think, for this team to get off on the right foot, because this is listen, we're going to hopefully be talking about this team at the halfway point as a team that's 5-1, maybe 6-0, like at 5-0 at some point. And you start looking at it, it's like, man, they've won 11 of the last 12 games. And you're starting to shift all these narratives of the program in general. When we come back, I want to talk about Not just LaNorris and how good of a job he did during the scrimmage, but also, and there's no stats, by the way, but also some of the names that popped up that kind of surprised some people in the scrimmage itself, offensively and defensively, going into the 2025 season. We will get to that when we come back. But before we do, want to give a shout out to none other than our great friends at Game Time. And listen, the season is coming. We are so close, and we've all been there. Listen, logging on early, waiting forever, trying to get into concert tickets, trying to find your event, sitting there in the queue or whatever it is. It's the weirdest spelled name ever. And sitting there trying to figure out how to get tickets that are on as they go on sale for like your favorite band, your favorite concert, your favorite comedian, whatever. And here's the deal. There's nothing worse than trying to type out a password of that weird Chick-fil-A cow that puts all the different letters together that spell nothing, and you got to put together a magic eye. So while you're in the queue trying to see your favorite band or whoever artist. Live music shouldn't be about that. It should be about making memories. I hope you guys get that reference, by the way. Not dealing with the stress of ticket shopping, and that's where Game Time comes in. Game Time makes getting concert tickets faster and easier than ever. Prices actually drop as it gets closer to showtime, and you can save up to 60% off with their killer last-minute deals. I tell you what, take the guesswork out of buying concert tickets and show tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Now, terms apply, but again, create an account, redeem the code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. Last-minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. We'll be right back with more Locked On Gamecocks right after this. All right. What's going on? Let's get back into it real quick. So looking at the scrimmage stats, or not stats, but the just the intel and what we've heard, right? Like I said, LaNorris looked good. Cutter Woods got a couple of mentions. Again, Luke Doty is the backup right now, QB2. The names that also were mentioned, LaNorris Sellers' brother, Jaden. And I think that's a testament of him coming in, even though he is not one of the names that we have seen on these, like, seems like now an endless list of four-star recruits at receiver. He's a 3-star recruit. He's a local kid. He's the little brother of LaNorris. And I think when things like that happen, you have all those like he has already, I think, become the victim of cliche ignorance. And what I mean by that is this, and this is not attack at Gamecocks fans. This is just like the assumptive ideas and perception of what he is. Like, well, it's a 3-star, but it's LaNorris' little brother, so of course they're going to offer him, right? Like, also he's kind of like considered by some probably more of a little bit of an afterthought in the recruiting class in comparison to all these other big, high-profile 4-star recruits. And that's like pretty normal, I think, for fans, because you get enamored with the bright lights and the shiny whatever and the names that have a 5-star or a 4-star attached to them on the on the recruiting services and all that kind of stuff. That's normal. But all those things kind of coming in and coming into play, I feel like it's a guy we haven't talked a ton about, right? And he went out and he apparently had a good Saturday. He had a good first showing trying to get in the mix to get out there on the field for the start of the season. So maybe he is a guy that's going to be seeing a lot more playing time than we initially expected. The other one, of course, Brian Rowe, he continues to be a kid that he just seems, I don't know if polished is the right word or if it's just natural ability, but like everything that I have heard, the word that keeps coming to mind is effortless. And what he has done is gone out there and over and over and over again and put himself in the situations where he has won his one-on-one matchups. He's won his off the line, whether it's off the line, whether it's going up and getting a ball at its highest point, or just going to attacking the football and trying to make sure that he is getting leverage against the DB in his route running. He's done a great job at all those things. And again, this has not been said, but the wise beyond the years type feeling you get with Brian Rowe, just the way he's able to run his routes, very smooth, very effortless. And then the other part is this: it's it's not raw. It just seems to be a little bit more advanced and a little bit less like of a chore or something you have to learn, or like it feels innate and natural when he's out there. So there's that. The other one was this. This one kind of surprised me a little bit. Brady Hunt getting continued work, and you heard this in the spring a bunch, right? Like a guy that really listen, he's at Ball State a couple years ago, not a huge recruit. Looking at it right now, just to pull it up on the safe side, 119th ranked tight end in the country. He was ranked 2062 overall. He was only the 32 ranked player in the state of Indiana, right? Not exactly a huge fertile ground for recruits and stuff like that. But I tell you what, it is a position that, like, I've said this over and over again. Last year, your top receiver was a tight end. You've had a tight end be in the top 4 or 5, I believe it's top 4 though, in receptions in 3 of the last 4 years or 4 of the last 5. Like it has been a big part of the offense, especially in the Beamer era. Last year was the best example of that. I still think Michael Smith is going to be a physical mismatch and a matchup nightmare for people in the red zone. But when you have a guy like this, like Michael Smith, isn't the guy that I'm going to want to target on a 3-yard out or run somebody into the flats to try to get some of these plays in the passing game that are more extensions of the run game. We've talked about this before, and you saw it over and over and again last year, where it felt like a lot of times almost like the first passing play was this, and you get into a shotgun formation, Rocket Sanders is over to LaNorris' left or right, and you're trying to draw on a linebacker with a play action pass, and then you're just getting him out in the flat. You're getting Josh Simon out in the flat, and you're doing that, and you're completing 4, 5, 6 yard gains. So now you're in second and short. Now you're in like a much more manageable situation, trying to even get to third and short and much more convertible. I don't know if that's the right way to phrase it. Third downs, right, to keep the drive going. But that's a drive starter, and it's something that this offense has been a big believer in. Brady Hunt being more of a possession type tight end, a more high volume guy, not as much as and listen, he's not a small guy. Right, he's 6'5", 250. But, like, I don't know if this is a guy that's going to line up and all of a sudden be in a situation where he's going to be what's the way I'm trying to phrase it here? I don't think he's going to go be Brock Bowers, right? I think between the two, Michael Smith has that, I think, more probably big playability and yards after the catch and all that kind of stuff. Not to say that Hunt won't do that. It's just more that I think that's the style of player he is. He also might be a little bit further ahead on blocking, and that's something we're going to need on this year's team, because you're going to need people that are going to be able to help chip defensive ends and help out with this offensive line. We talked about this again, and not trying to harp on it, but these are a combination of tackles here that you have at South Carolina, including Josiah Thompson. I know how big of a recruit he was, but they were the lowest rated in terms of PFF grades. They were the lowest rated tackles in the SEC at pressures allowed, sacks allowed, all those things. So you're going to need tight ends that are capable and willing in the blocking, not just in the run game, but also in pass pro as well. Sometimes just to have an extra man up on the line to help protect Sellers. So thought that was interesting. I didn't hear a single thing about Russell Faison, which sucks, because now you're getting into 3 weeks out from the game. 3 weeks from today, the game will be over. You will have played your first game, and you'll be 1-0 in the win column, God willing. But you still haven't heard anything from the NCAA, and as it gets closer and closer, now you got to start actually managing your reps, and you got to start figuring out, like, I mean, what do we do here with Oscar Attaway and Matthew Fuller? Like, do we start giving them a bigger dose of the designed play calls and practice reps and all those things going into the first game of the season? It's not over yet. I mean, Faison could still very much be a big part of the team. He could also still be a big – you saw it again with that kid from North Carolina. He could still end up being a big part of this team during the season. Like, at some point, they have to make a decision. Like, there's no way – knock on wood. I was going to say there's no way, but that they would just go through the entire season without making a decision. But it's also the NCAA, and they're so stupid. So they might be dumb enough to have that happen. Anyway, didn't hear anything from him in the run game. Did hear that Attaway kind of looks better than he has in years past. A little bit more burst, and a guy that's really trying to fight for a position on this team. And kind of, you know, I think that this kind of is similar to the Sellers situation, which I think a lot of people were high on Oscar Attaway like a year or so ago. coming in, but like he wasn't a guy that you were going to be more excited about than Rocket Sanders. And this year, especially, not just because of the NCAA stuff and how much has been talked about, but the excitement for the most part has really, really been around what Russell Faison's going to do. That's partially because, like, he's a good back. He's already been very productive, and it's like he's a new shiny toy you got at Christmas. Like he came in the transfer portal. He's a new name, and that's an exciting thing for South Carolina fans to hear about and hopefully see. But by all means, Oscar Attaway is very much still in the fold and working very, very hard to make sure he is involved. So the other thing is this. We'll close with this in a second. The defensive side of the ball. Dylan Stewart, and I don't know why I didn't think about this earlier. Dylan Stewart is bigger, faster, and just seems like a little bit more polished and even more more of a game wrecker, I guess, in practice so far. That's like the intel that I was told, at least. It shouldn't be a surprise, but it did dawn on me just now that it's like, as much as we've talked about the offensive line, like Dylan Stewart going up against that combination of guys, and this is not a knock on them because I'm sure they're getting better, but like I'm not sure we're going to be getting the same type of reps for Dylan Stewart in practice that he's giving to the offensive line, if that makes sense. Like they're probably getting better because of how hard it is to manage going up against that dude every day. Like you think about Georgia players talk about this all the time. Like the best players they would go up against for over half the year, some of those years under Kirby, is we're in practice every day. Like that offensive line going up against the 2021 defensive line of Georgia, like that's kind of what this kid is. Like I'm sure Josiah Thompson, like the best defensive end he is going to play all year, he sees 5-6 days a week in practice in Columbia, South Carolina. So we'll see. We'll see where that goes, what happens from there. When we come back, excuse me, when we come back, we'll talk real briefly about the latest news from LaNorris Sellers, and we will close out today's show. All right, final thoughts from today. I hope you guys are doing well. I hope you guys had a good weekend. 3 more weekends. Oh boy. 3 more weekends, and we are going to be at football season. Really, I mean, football season starts next 2 Saturdays from now, which is kind of a lot to think about because we're recording this right now on Sunday night. And I was telling the fiance at dinner, you guys, like next Sunday, it's game week. Like for the first week of the season. I know South Carolina's not playing that week 0, but week 1, I mean, we're 20 days away now. So fired up for that. Obviously, cannot wait. The news that came out last week, we're going to try to get Brooks Austin on the show this week. Film guy, does a great job breaking down film, and he's very high in LaNorris Sellers. And a lot of people are. But the news that came out earlier this week where Archie Manning, and it surprisingly didn't get as much coverage as I thought it would. Because anything with Archie Manning attached to it is like, it's so weird. It's just like, it's Tebow all over again. But it's like just in a different shade of orange. So the thing that we were told from Archie Manning was he thinks he's going to be back for another year. He thinks he's going to be back at Texas for another year. He's not going to be in the NFL draft. So when that happened, the odds and the odds makers and sports books out in Vegas changed their odds. They updated them. And LaNorris Sellers is now the number 1 overall projected, or he's the projected number 1 overall pick, has the best odds. It's -300. Behind him is Nussmeier at -350. And then someone else, I forgot who's tied with him, but he has the best odds in Vegas sportsbooks to go number 1 overall for next year. Now, speaking of that, Spencer Rattler. This is a weird coincidence. Now with my job over here, my main job, I'm a little bit closer to the Saints and our coverage of them. And ironically enough, I don't know if I've ever shared this with you guys. Just a little bit like personal, kind of funny information. So I work for ESPN 104.5 in Baton Rouge and LouisianaSports.net. Our Saints writer, Ross Jackson, he's also the Locked On host for the Saints. So if you're a Saints fan, you listen to this, give him a listen. my boss, Matt Moscona, is the Locked On host for LSU. So that was not by design, but all three of us at this little website that we're trying to grow have also become or also the Locked On host for those two things. But anyway, talked to Ross earlier today. He's out in LA for the first game of the year for the Saints. Spencer Rattler gets his first start. Didn't go great. Didn't go poorly, but just didn't go great. He started out, I thought, pretty well. 5 of 7. He had a big throw that was dropped on the sideline, but he did get a strip sack that he fumbled and didn't end the way you wanted it to. Tyler Shuck, the first-year quarterback that I think is actually older than Spencer Rattler from 2019. Maybe he's younger. I don't know, the same age. But Rattler, he gets taken out. He had four drives or so. Ends up going 7 of 11, so 64%. For 57 yards. He also ran for like 20, or I think he ran for 23. So he had around like 75, 80 yards of total offense. Did not have a touchdown and was, I think, 0 for on third downs. But he did make some nice throws, and he wasn't super helped out by the receivers. Not how I was hoping it would go for him, because Tyler Shuck also came in, got way more opportunities, got double the amount of attempts. He had 22 attempts as opposed to Rattler's 11. Completed 15 of those, though. Ended up with a 68% completion percentage, had a touchdown. Also threw a pick six and all that. So the other news that came out of that game, and the Saints have one of the worst offensive lines just in general. They've not been very good. They have tried to shore it up with their left tackle. But the center position, their center, longtime center, I can't remember his name now, he retired in the offseason. So Cesar Ruiz shifted to center. He got injured, so he's out. Then Will Clapp came in, and he was starting at center for them today. By the third play, he's carted off the field due to injury. So you're down to your third-string center. Your third-string center, ladies and gentlemen, Torricelli Simpkins. And Torricelli Simpkins played well. He played well. I was actually surprised when I saw his name on the depth chart when they released going into the first training camp. He's kind of stuck around a little bit. But he played really well. So Torricelli Simpkins, he ends up having a great first day and first game in preseason camp for the Saints, as opposed to Spencer Rattler. But Spencer Rattler will obviously plenty of time to continue battling for that position. That is all. That is all from our Gamecocks and the pros, specifically for one team that we're looking at. Anyway, I appreciate you guys listening. I hope you guys have a great rest of your morning, afternoon, night, whenever you're listening to this. We'll be back tomorrow with another episode, and we've got a big week planned as well, with several guests joining the show, including Brooks Austin, SEC Mike Bratton, you might have saw him in the SEC documentary, and Chris Doring as well. So I hope you guys will enjoy that. Chris Doring from SEC Network, who was at camp last week. Appreciate you guys, and until next time, go Cox.